5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to another installment of Ask Eddie and Ann and Charlotte. We came into this recording just a split second too late because Charlotte let out a beautiful yowl that would have made her an internet sensation. But look at her just all relaxed right there, just chilling out. She looks like she could use one of these restorative gin and tonics that I have here. She looks ready for it. How are you, Ann?
I'm good. Thank you very much. Charlotte was a little cranky yesterday. I actually went down to Concord to visit friends. When I came back, she let me know she was not pleased that I had not come home.
I hope she didn't leave souvenirs or something as a sign of her displeasure.
No, she does not do that, thank God.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
good.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Ann, here's the deal. We're going to mix it up a little bit this time around because I have seen the questions this time in advance, and I've decided that we'll split it up a little bit. So I'm going to read some of them that are directed somewhat more towards you. So it's and we'll just see how that goes. So we'll see if we can do this effectively.
Okay. And I did want to bring up before we start on the questions that we do right now in July have a matching donation drive for $1,000, and that's on behalf of Elizabeth Rachel Heavey Brearley, who is a moderator of the Facebook group, the Femme, Fatale, a film noir, who passed away recently, and Peter, who's the admin for that group, set this up.
That was incredibly generous of Peter, and I can't thank him enough. Since the last time we announced that, we have seen some donations coming in, which are greatly appreciated. And this matching donation drive will last until when?
Through the end of July. So we've got a couple more days on it.
Okay, very, very good. Fantastic. Okay, thank you again, Peter. That's terrific. And thank you, people who have already donated. And to those of you about to donate, we salute you. to semi-quote AC/DC. There you go. Okay, I'm going to start off because I saw this question come across. I'm not actually sure if this person played by the rules and sent this via Ask Eddie, but I saw this and I liked it so much that I decided to add it to the thing, and I want to hear your answer to all of this. Okay, so this is from Paul Cavaco in Mississauga, Canada. Mississauga, Canada. I hope you're not one of those, Paul, that complains when the TCM movie isn't shown in Canada on Saturdays and Sundays. We get a lot of that. Okay, but here's what Paul says. I am a great lover of film and film history, and I owe a great deal of this passion to my wonderful grandmother, who absolutely adored cinema. My fondest memories are at a very young age sitting at her feet watching late-night classic films on Friday and Saturdays. She would pass her knowledge of these films on to me, and I would be enthralled by her stories. She adored Robert Mitchum, Christopher Plummer, Ginger Rogers, and Barbara Stanwyck, and she passed on that love of these icons and their films to me. These days, I enjoy watching the films late at night because I think it subconsciously connects me to my wonderful grandmother and the memories I have of watching films with her. When I watch things like Out of the Past, it brings back a flood of memories because I know she adored that film. I can barely get through A Tree Grows in Brooklyn without bawling my eyes out at Peggy Ann Garner's incredible performance and its connection to my grandmother's love of that film. So my question is, was there anyone in either Eddie or Ann's life that influenced or had an impact on their love of film, much like my grandmother had on me? Or are there any particular films that automatically connect you with them? Pardon me, Paul. Thank you so much to the both of you for doing these live streams and keeping the love of cinema alive. So, Ann, I'm going to toss that one to you right off the bat. Is there somebody in your impressionable years that fostered your love of film?
Yeah, actually, my father did. When I was in high school, he really supported the passion I had for film. And we were in London at that time, and so there would be, the BBC would screen films like uncut. So it would be like the whole film, no commercials. And they had like a series of, well, they have like series. So it'd be like a series of Coppola films or whatever. And I just have memories of just, you know, watching stuff with my dad, like The Man Who Fell to Earth was one of the films that we watched together. And then I also remember one time that we were watching The Graduate, and you know, it got to the strip bar scene, and I remember my mom like coming into the room and turning the television off because she didn't think that was appropriate. So
well, I was saying that your mom sounds like she was a killjoy. I mean,
well, that was then. My mother actually, I mean, once we're older, didn't care about stuff like that because she was like this huge, like, when I was working at a video store in Boulder, you know, I would call and talk to my mom all the time. And she was like, you have to see this film, Clerks. This guy is such a great director and he's going to really go places, you know? So like we had it at the store and I watched it and it got to the scene where they're talking about like snowballing, and I'm going, I can't believe my mother recommended this.
My mother recommended this, and it's interesting because, well, you're younger, you're of a younger generation, and that was neat when you said you like watched Coppola films, a series of Coppola films, because, you know, that just shows that this is a generational thing. It has less to do with the quality of the movies than it has to do with just the movie watching experience. And I don't mean the quality of the movies, you know what I mean? It's like this gentleman, Paul, was talking about, obviously, you know, classic films from the 40s and 50s, and you're talking about films from the 70s, but it's the same shared experience. And I have to say, I get this all the time. My favorite letters that I get through TCM are from people who share the movies with their parents.
Yeah.
And it's either a parent saying, I love turning my children onto these movies, or it's children saying, this gives me something I can do with my aging parent who might be in an assisted living facility or something, and it's a way of connecting with them. I didn't really have somebody like that. I was the one that was into, I guess I was just always into storytelling and was very much a loner. So I read comic books kind of by myself. I didn't really have a group of friends that read comic books. And the same with watching movies. I mean, I've told the story of watching Deadline USA with my dad because it was a newspaper movie and people had told him he should see it. And that was the first time I'd ever seen my father cry, was at the end of that movie, which said something about the power of movies. You know, when they hit your sweet spot, that can really be something. But I have several really funny stories about watching movies with my mom, because even though I was the movie fanatic, my mom sort of she liked old movies. She loved Betty Davis movies, and you know, Betty Davis was her performer, and she was very much like Betty Davis. She could give a performance very much in the Betty Davis mode. But when I would want to go to the movies, my mom would try to share that with me, which led to some really embarrassing and awkward things, like going to see Cries and Whispers with her, and not having any idea what she was getting into. But the ultimate one was seeing Swept Away, you know, where she had no idea, that, you know, it's because Swept Away sounds like the premise of an old Hollywood movie, you know. This wealthy woman and her boatman are trapped on an island together and must learn to coexist, you know. Yeah, there was no like anal rape in old Hollywood movies though. So, you know, that was not like she was not prepared for that. And even though all of the language was in Italian, it was translated on the screen in the subtitles. So she not only had to hear Giancarlo Giannini saying this stuff, she had to like read it on the screen. That lasted for about 30 minutes. And then she excused herself and went and sat in the lobby of the old surf theater out in the avenues and ate some Toblerone chocolate while her, I guess I was like 16 or something,
Yeah.
and she couldn't pull me out of the movie. You know, that would be too embarrassing in front of an auditorium full of people. So she just sucked it up and let me watch the whole movie, but she was hugely embarrassed. And anyway, that's that story.
Well, my parents actually came to town one time, and it was when a Pedro Almodovar festival was playing. So, and they liked his films. So they said, okay, I said, there's 2 I have to see in a theater, and like, we'll go with you. So it was 2 different nights, but it was Law of Desire and Matador. And I just remember, like, I was talking to somebody at the video store saying, oh yeah, I saw these with my parents. And like, you watched those movies in a theater with your parents? Because they're both very sexually explicit.
Yeah.
But it was just like, I mean, my dad did like burst out in hysterical laughter when we walked out of the theater after Law of Desire, because, you know, it was sort of a ridiculous thing to watch with your daughter. But but then it's fun. For some reason, I've heard a lot of these stories this week under different circumstances. People talking about the embarrassment of watching generally sex stuff in a movie theater with your parents. You know, I remember seeing Raging Bull with my dad, and, you know, that scene with Kathy Moriarty before the fight with Jake LaMotta, or with Robert De Niro, was a little raunchy. Or seeing Taxi Driver with my dad, that was a little, yeah.
It wasn't so much the violence. It was Harvey Keitel had some choice dialogue in that movie that was a little embarrassing to hear with your father sitting next to you. Anyway. Okay. Good question, Paul. Thank you very much for that. Or good reminiscence. Thank you very much, Paul.
Why don't you ever show Bud Bedeker's fine film noir, The Rise and Fall of Legs Diamond? This is a great film noir starring Ray Danton, and that's from Brian.
I mean, it's not like I wouldn't show it. It's never actually, if you're talking about at the Noir City festivals, it's because it's never actually fit into one of the themes that we've done. You know, I have shown it on Turner Classic Movies, just not as part of Noir Alley. I've shown it just separately. I will be showing next year. I'll be showing Bedeker's The Killer Is Loose on Noir Alley. So there's no reason, you know, I'm not denying the film's existence or its quality. It's terrific, but it just hasn't. The little roulette ball hasn't fallen in that spot on the roulette wheel yet. So it's nice that there are still things yet for me to show. Sometimes I kind of get nervous, like, are we getting close to the end here? But there's always stuff left to show.
Hello, Eddie. My husband is a super film noir film buff and has been for years. We went to a film you hosted in San Francisco about 20 years ago. You have his dream job. My question is, if you had to choose a female femme fatale or not to live with or survive on an island for the rest of your life, who would it be and why? Character or actress? And there wasn't a name given to that, so it's an anonymous.
So it's a secret. It's an anonymous one. Yeah, well, if I have this guy's dream job, he's not going to tell me who he is because I'll be on the lookout for him. You know, he'll try to bump me off and take my job. It would be Ella Raines.
Oh, okay. Why Ella Raines?
Because she'd probably be better at building a life raft than I would. You know, I mean, I don't want some gorgeous dame who's going to lie around and wait for me to do everything. I want a woman like my wife, a self-reliant woman who will get things done on her own. And, you know, that's the role that Ella Raines played in all of her noir films, you know. So if somebody comes along and kills me, she's going to hunt them down and, you know,
there you go,
and find it. She'll avenge me. So yeah, and she's a dish too, so that doesn't hurt. But I very much like Ella Raines, and that's my number one answer, and I'm sticking with it.
Sounds good. I know you were close to Anne Savage after your interview with her. Can you provide the backstory of her role in an unusual faux documentary about life in Winnipeg, Manitoba. How this all came about and why she participated in the film. It was a shock to see her in this type of film.
Yeah, that's Guy Maddin's film, My Winnipeg, which is terrific. It sounds to me like Phil from Boston wasn't a huge fan of My Winnipeg, but yes, Anne and I had become very close by the time that offer came around. And I'm actually friends with Guy Maddin. And so Guy knew that I knew Anne, and apparently he felt that Anne was the only actress who could adequately portray his mother in a film. And so he asked me to kind of grease the skids and see if she would do it. And lo and behold, she did. And it was an intriguing experience for everyone involved, I'm sure, because Guy certainly does not work in the normal way that Anne was used to in movies or television. Guy is a very unusual, eclectic filmmaker, and I think Anne was glad she did it. It got her some notoriety, but I'm not sure she ever actually watched the finished film. But that's the story. So I kind of brokered that happening.
I did not know that, Eddie.
Yeah.
Okay, here's the next one. Eddie and Ann, I just completed the first season of Ask Eddie. It was great. Congratulations. Thank you. And if you've missed any of our episodes, if you go to our YouTube channel, North City SF, you can get caught up on them as well. Okay.
Very good.
Okay, here's the first question. The first season of The Adventures of Superman starring George Reeves, do you or Ann consider the first season only as film noir?
I don't.
I haven't seen it, so I have no opinion.
I mean, I'll be honest, I haven't revisited it, but I used to watch that show when it was in syndication. When I was a teenager, I'd watch it all the time. And I do think there's a tendency from a lot of people, because early television, where you see a lot of actors that from film noir doing early television, and it's black and white, and it looks like B movies, right? So I think there's a tendency to say, "Wow, is this noir too?" But guys in tights that jump out windows and fly, I'm not going there. I'm the guy who holds the line and says, "Yeah, I see where the new Batman movies are more noir than the superhero movies they made, back in the day." But I still don't think that superhero stuff it can be influenced by noir. It can kind of imitate noir at times, but it isn't noir.
And here's a second question. The hat on the head of Harrison Ford in the movies, the Indiana Jones movies, is it a fedora, I wonder, or is it a reshaped cowboy hat?
Oh, that is, and I like the way he's so specific in this question. The hat on his head. Yes, that is unquestionably a fedora. And actually, that is I guess I can say my buddy, Jim Steranko, the comic book artist, is the guy who actually designed Indiana Jones. George Lucas and those guys, Spielberg and those guys, employed him as a designer. But Jim was the guy who did the original sketches of Indiana Jones and created him with the leather jacket and the fedora and the bullwhip and that whole thing. That was Jim. And it's interesting because Jim was very much a fan of the old pulps. And when you think about it, Indiana Jones, the look of Indiana Jones is kind of a cross between Doc Savage, who was a huge character in the pulps, but the hat kind of comes from the Shadow. Mm-hmm. And for years, Jim painted the paperback book covers of the Shadow novels by Walter Gibson. And you know, so he kind of put these influences together to create Indiana Jones for a whole new generation. So that look of Indiana Jones is very much from the 30s. Well, the film is set back then, but you know, that was his inspiration as a young boy, and then he created this Indiana Jones figure that you know, a later generation would, you know, make an icon out of Harrison Ford.
And let's see, Robert Mitchum. That, by the way, was Jeffrey from Brooklyn. I don't think I said that.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Robert Mitchum had a photographic memory, or he alluded to it in various interviews I've read and seen. He could read a script once and not need to read it again. Do you know of any other noir actors who had this ability? And that's from Martin, Los Angeles.
Off the top of my head, I can't definitively answer that, but I will tell you this, that ability is not as rare as you might think. I think the reason it got noted in terms of Robert Mitchum is because he had an attitude that made it seem like he was a guy who never even read a script.
Yeah.
So the fact that he could learn his lines so quickly and efficiently is why people noted that. You know, Jane Greer told me that he was incredible at coming in kind of half hungover, and then he'd, you know, say, let me see the lyrics. Let me see the lyrics. And then he would like look at the page and he would know he'd memorize everybody's lines, not just his, but he knew what everybody else was saying as well, which is really good for an actor to not just focus on their own lines, but know what other people are doing as well. Anyway, I don't think it's that incredibly rare in actors to look at it once and have it. But Mitchum is the only one where I think it stands out because of his casual attitude towards performing. It doesn't look like he would have that ability.
Okay. And the next one is from Judy in Washington, D.C. And I'm going to mispronounce this. Would you consider
La Piscine
a film noir? Have you a subcategory of sunny film noirs? Some have stark, angry white sun, although a few seem to have some idyllic sunny scenes, even Chinatown, that evolve into dark scenarios. La Piscine seems to fit with no lack of passion, greed, murder, and maybe another element, ennui. Seems like boredom is often an element within film noir too. Have you included that as a characteristic of noir?
Boredom is often an element in European film noir. It is not really an element in American film noir. I think it's against the law to be bored in an American movie. It's almost mandatory in European film noir, right? And thank you for that question, Judy, whom I met recently when we did that show at the Hollywood Legion.
Oh, cool.
That weekend of noir. Judy actually came out from Washington to attend those shows, and I got to meet her in person. She's quite charming. Yeah, if the question is, are there sunny noirs? Of course. I mean, Plein Soleil, the René Clément film, Purple Noon with Alain Delon, is certainly one of those. There are a lot more. But I have no problem with that when the motivations of the characters fit the noir profile. I don't require the dark streets and the rain and all that stuff. So yeah, you tend to see much more of that in Europe, in Claude Chabrol movies and things like that. But I'll go along with that.
Okay.
Oh, look, and here's the next question, which I'm going to read. Yeah, right. I just saw, Suzanne says, I just saw Purple Noon, it's a film, and the Matt Damon film this week. I'm going to assume she's referring to The Talented Mr. Ripley, and would like your take on how the two compare, because they are both based on The Talented Mr. Ripley by Patricia Highsmith. I preferred the French version except for the wimpy ending. Also, thanks for your recommendation of Croupier, was wondering if you could post a list of movies you discussed, perhaps with the YouTube videos. I can't keep track of your recommendations. Okay, Suzanne. I like both those versions of The Talented Mr. Ripley. A lot of people, I mean, Alain Delon is fantastic, and Maurice Ronet and these guys, you know. Alain Delon is not my image of Tom Ripley from the Highsmith books. You know, Ripley was somebody who impersonated people, and Alain Delon is one of the most beautiful human beings ever put on the face of the earth. So, like, it's not like he can go around pretending to be somebody else. So that's why I kind of thought, you know, Matt Damon got a lot of grief from people who liked that source material, saying he was not well cast in the part, and they said Jude Law should have played Ripley. And I thought, these people are comparing it to Purple Noon and saying that Jude Law is more handsome and more beautiful, you know, than Matt Damon, ergo he's closer to Alain Delon. But I think that misses the entire point, is that Matt Damon had to look like, I liked his performance as kind of an aw shucks, gee whiz American guy who is deeply perverted and devious and a schemer and will stop at nothing to get what he wants, even if it's somebody else's life. So I actually thought Matt Damon was perfect casting in that movie, and Jude Law was great as Dickie. You know, I have no problems with that movie. And I thought Philip Seymour Hoffman was fantastic in that film. Really, one of the great like supporting roles in a newer noir film. So I like them both.
Yeah, I mean, I like them both. I think that The Talented Miss Ripley with Matt Damon is the best adaptation of that story. I think Matt Damon is the best Ripley that I've seen, because, I mean, that's a magnificent performance. And exactly because you need to have that disparity between what he looks like on the outside and how he acts, and that, you know, he's a sociopath. And I just thought that he gave an incredible performance. I am not that wild about Jude Law in that film. I was really surprised that he got, you know, Best Supporting Actor for that. A dear friend of mine said that they should have given that Best Supporting Actor award to the cinematographer rather than Jude Law.
Yeah.
You know, and I agree with you. I think Philip Seymour Hoffman is incredible in that film. You know, especially, you know, it's kind of interesting because he's very privileged and arrogant, and he's so privileged and arrogant that he really can't see how dangerous Ripley is.
Right.
You know, and he thinks that he's gonna, because he's who he is, that you know, he can't get it.
Well, he's like the super smart preppy who thinks that because he's smarter, he's always going to have the advantage, and he doesn't realize that doesn't work when you're dealing with a sociopath.
Mm-hmm.
And here's also a chance for us to plug the fact that in a recent issue of the Noir City magazine, I think Ray Banks did a whole essay on all the Ripley movies.
Yeah, he did.
All the adaptations of every Highsmith Ripley novel, and it's terrific. So you can get that in a back issue. I think it's listed on the cover of one of the back issues. I can't remember at the moment which issue that is. I'm embarrassed to say. But also, just real quick, what's weird is when filmmakers who make the Ripley movies cast people who seem sociopathic right on the surface. I don't get that. Like Dennis Hopper in The American Friend is about as far from Tom Ripley as you can possibly get. And John Malkovich has also played the part. And it's like, you can kind of see him coming, you know? And that's the whole thing with Ripley, is that you don't get it. You know, he tricks people into believing what he wants them to believe because he has this kind of benign surface, you know. And anyway, so I hope Matt Damon is listening, because we just praised him as like a really good Ripley. So there you have it.
And this is from Michael. Eddie, I've been wondering if The Ice Harvest, directed by Harold Ramis and starring John Cusack and Billy Bob Thornton, has any traction as a neo-noir. The first time I watched it in 2005, I consider it as advertised as a black comedy. I watched it many times since, and it's more a quirky neo-noir. Any thoughts on its noir qualities or the film in general?
I love these questions this time around because it's making me feel like a big shot, because I get to say, oh, you know I'm friends with the guy who wrote The Ice Harvest, Scott Phillips, who wrote The Ice Harvest. We kind of started writing crime fiction almost at exactly the same time. And of course, Scott has gone on to write a great many terrific books where I kind of petered out after two. But yeah, The Ice Harvest, the book sort of hit like a thunderclap, and was really almost regarded like an instant classic when the book came out. The book has a lot of humor in it, but it's not the black comedy that the movie is. But I've shown The Ice Harvest as our Christmas movie at the Noir City Christmas show, right? Because it goes to show you how it's all a matter of tone. Because if you take the plot of The Ice Harvest and play it straight, it's completely noir. But if you put a couple of actors in it, like John Cusack and Billy Bob Thornton, or Oliver Platt, who's also in it and is really funny, and then the bad guy is played outrageously by Randy Quaid, then they amp up the humor. And Harold Ramis directed the movie, right? And Harold Ramis is mostly a comedy director, so the balance of humor to the crime elements and the drama elements was much higher with Harold Ramis directing it than it would have been if somebody else had done it. But that it was a great script. Richard Russo was one of the screenwriters. He's one of my favorite novelists, and I think Robert Benton was also involved in producing that movie. So I like that movie a lot. There's some classic scenes in that film. Trying to get rid of the scene of Cusack and Billy Bob trying to get rid of the body is just spectacular. It's really, really great. And Connie Nielsen is in it too. We can't forget Connie Nielsen. She's terrific.
Yeah, and Connie Nielsen is actually a Danish actress.
Well, all the better.
Only made one.
You're trying to find some way to bring Danish films into this conversation. I know, some way we're gonna have to put a moratorium on the Danish films. Okay.
Growing up, my mom was an usherette in the old Oakland, California theater, Lux, Rex, etc. She was a single mom. Her boss let her take us to work during her shift. We had to sit there and watch movies over and over again, which is why I love classic movies. There is one movie in particular that I remember watching as a child that stayed with me. I'm sure it was a noir film. Here's the scene. Man standing against a telephone pole or building. He has a Vicks tube-like inhaler in his hand and dropped it. A little boy went to fetch it for him, but the bad guy stepped on the kid's hand to retrieve it so he could retrieve it himself. That scene stayed with me because I thought the man was so mean to the kid who was only trying to help. I want to say the mean man may have been Lee Marvin, but in my limited search, I couldn't find anything. As for Mary, do you know what the film is?
Yes, I do know what the film is. I love it when I know them.
I know, it's really exciting. This is the second time in a row that you've gotten it.
And congratulations, Mary. You are correct. It is Lee Marvin. And the film is Violent Saturday, a Technicolor widescreen film. Notice how I didn't immediately say noir, because people will all argue that. But yeah, Violent Saturday, about a gang that comes into this small town in Arizona to rob the bank. And there is exactly that scene in the movie. Marvin has the little inhaler, and he drops it and steps on the kid's hand, and it's great. And what's so classic is you show that scene in 1955 when the movie was made, and everybody goes, "Oh, terrible, man. Oh, you show that scene today, and the whole audience erupts in laughter because they just think that's great, because they love Lee Marvin being a rat bastard is, everybody loves that. So
yeah, and
he is terrific in that movie.
He is really great in it. I highly, highly recommend that film. And it made me say the words I thought I would never say, which was, "My God, Robert Egan was great in that film."
Yeah, he is good.
My God, he's great in that film.
Well, and there are a couple of movies that I like. A Kiss Before Dying and Violent Saturday are the noir 50s noir films that Douglas Sirk didn't make.
Yeah,
because they play just like Douglas Sirk movies, especially, well, both of them really, but Violent Saturday is just like, it's a small town soap opera, with Sylvia Sidney as the kleptomaniac, and Tommy Noonan is the voyeur who, spies through people's window. It's like Peyton Place with a bank heist, and it's good. It's really good. Yeah. Okay. That's a good one.
Okay, and this is from Dennis J. Any information on Robert Bray? He turns up in a ton of noirs as well as westerns and television. I thought he made a good Mike Hammer and would have loved to seen him in more leading roles.
Well, after scoring with that last question, I'm going to whiff on this one because I don't really know that much about Robert Bray, and I'll make a confession to everyone right here. I've never shown a Robert Bray film. Like, I haven't shown his Mike Hammer movies yet. And a lot of times I don't really get into these actors and research them until I'm going to be showing one of the movies. Then I learn everything I can learn. And then when I say it, people think I've known this for 30 years when I've probably known it for 30 minutes. But maybe I'm saying more than I should, but I just don't know that much about Robert Bray, but I'm definitely going to look him up now.
Okay.
And he was in, which I'm trying to remember, was it My Gun is Quick? I think maybe it was My Gun is Quick was the Mike Hammer picture that he was in, because Biff Elliott is I, the Jury. And we all know Ralph Meeker, but I think that Robert Bray was My Gun is Quick, which a film that I know has some lovers and some devotees, but I have not gotten around to showing it, so I haven't delved into the backstory.
Okay, so this is from Juanita. Eddie, here's
your wait. Oh yeah, go ahead. Okay, go ahead.
You do the
first one. Yeah.
Can you tell me if you will be able to show White Mischief on Noir Alley?
I would say very doubtful. I like the film White Mischief, set in colonial South Africa. It's a good movie. Now that we've done this neo-noir series on TCM that Ben and I have been doing, all of July, which has been incredibly well received. I think the odds are pretty good that we're going to do another edition of that, maybe next year. That would be the earliest. I don't know that, and I can't really speak for TCM, but that's where it would show up. It would show up as a neo-noir film, not on Noir Alley. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But your nomination is in there, Juanita. I heard you. Okay, now I'm going to read one here because this question is directed to Anne and Charlotte. So wake up, Charlotte. Here's your big moment. Since you are a big fan of Dan Duryea, and so am I, perhaps you can tell me about a series he did as the character China Smith. I used to watch the series as a kid growing up in Texas and would love to get copies of it if at all possible. This again is Juanita Ali asking this question.
Yeah, so China Smith, yeah, that was an interesting show. So it was on television. It ran it was actually the first season was China Smith, and the second season was like the New Adventures of China Smith, because I think they got like a little bump up in budget, but not, they're cheap. They're really, really cheap, I'll be honest, but they're good. And it was fun for him, obviously, because, you know, he got to play the lead and a good guy. And
I am certain that Dan Duryea was also the producer of the series.
Yeah, I believe that he was, actually. And I did see all of them. I honestly cannot remember where I found them. So I think it was probably just like going through eBay, frankly, is how I got them. Because they haven't really gotten like a formal release, you know, like most of the television from that period.
Right.
It's really difficult to find those things. But I do remember there's a film called World for Ransom, which was basically done by the China Smith crew with Robert Aldrich actually directed that film.
Mm-hmm.
And I was on, and I had heard about it and never been able to find a copy of it. And then I was in New York, and my boyfriend at the time, no, I guess that was my husband, actually.
Can't keep track of him.
I know. I guess it was my husband. And we went to Kim's Video, which Kim's Video was legendary in New York. That was, you know, a internationally known video store. So we walk in there, and it's like, there it is. You know, it was obviously a scan from a Laserdisc, but I bought it anyway.
Right.
Yeah, and definitely that is a film worth watching too. But yeah, but I really wound up enjoying the China Smith TV series. It was cheap, but it was good.
Yeah. Well, so Juanita, if you didn't know this before, there is a movie where he's not China Smith in the World for Ransom, but it's basically the same.
Yeah, it's
same setup.
Yeah.
But now I knew in the last few years of his life, I knew Dan Duryea's son, Richard Duryea, and he had the family owned the rights to that show, so he was trying to find somebody to put the whole series out, you know, on Blu-ray or DVD or something. And to be honest, I'm not sure that ever happened, or if it was done without his knowledge, because he had the shows.
Yeah.
So you know, we should double check. That's not something the Film Noir Foundation could do, because we can't afford to do that. I mean, that putting out a whole television series, you know, I got a question the other day from somebody who wanted to know if we could restore and put out the entire Dragnet series, you know, because it's in the public domain, but people don't seem to realize how expensive that is. You know, we're able to restore movies that are like 68 to 88 minutes long. You know, you want to put out Dragnet, you're talking about, you know, innumerable 30-minute TV shows, you know, and it's like, holy cow, this is going to cost a fortune, you know. So I'd rather preserve movies than TV series, quite honestly. So anyway.
Okay, so Eddie and Ann, I think that if you ask men who are familiar with noir who their favorite actress of the period was, 8 or 9 out of 10 would say Gloria Grahame. I can't say what women might think, but Ann, I imagine you have some thoughts about that. I think it's sad that Gloria, a classically trained actress, for the most part, was pigeonholed into hard luck girl types of roles. I was lucky enough to find a first edition of Suicide Blonde by Vincent Surcio. This is 1989 biography of Gloria. It is not always an easy to read, as Gloria's life was not easy. There were many wonderful noir actresses, but I think Gloria was the emblematic noir woman.
Well, I'm going to let you answer this to start, because you wrote a piece about Gloria in an earlier edition of Noir City, right?
Yeah.
And you know, in our next issue, and Dana has written a really fabulous essay, sort of from the actress's perspective, which speaks to exactly the question that I don't see who asked this, the question that is being asked, like the fact that she was classically trained but kind of got pigeonholed doing this thing, which is not uncommon for actresses of that era. But I disagree with the suggestion. It's not really suggested, but that men like Gloria Grahame more than women, because I find that most women I know who are way into noir, like Dana Delaney, love Gloria.
Yeah.
You know, they empathize with her completely, and they love the fact that she's complicated. She's not just a one-dimensional femme fatale in these movies. She always plays very complicated women, and she has various shadings to it, and she's funny. In addition to being a little dangerous, she's also funny. And yeah, I think that's what makes her special and unique.
Yeah, I mean, and by the way, the issue is North City E-Magazine 4, and you can find that at northcitymag.com, and it's the one with Gloria Grahame on the cover. Yeah, I mean, I think she's a really good actress. I think her career was more diverse than maybe people realize. I mean, she was Ado Annie in Oklahoma. I mean, that's the first thing I ever saw her in. I didn't see her noir stuff till I was much older, but I'd seen Oklahoma so many times, you know. And so for me, that was sort of my first memory of her is, you know, in Ado Annie. She's great in it, by the way.
Yeah, and she won the Oscar for The Bad and the Beautiful.
Yeah, which
was the fewest amount of minutes on screen for an Oscar performance up to that point. I think she's not even on screen for like 7 minutes or something in the movie, but she won the Oscar, and she's in The Greatest Show on Earth. You know,
yeah,
she
is.
And other films that wouldn't be, you know, she's in It's a Wonderful Life, that, you know, and Man on a Tightrope and stuff like that aren't typically noir. And she, you know, later on she's great in Chilly Scenes of Winter, the Joan Micklin Silver movie. You know, that's an older Gloria, but she's really good in it. Anyway, so we all love Gloria. There's no question about that. And I'm just going to give a quick plug. In September, Dana will be on Noir Alley with me. And we will be presenting 2 Gloria Grahame movies. And Dana will be on to talk about, you know, her take on Gloria Grahame. Don't ask me to remember the dates. They're in September. So we're showing Human Desire and The Glass Wall are the 2 movies, and Dana will be doing that with me. So that's kind of exciting.
Well, and those are 2 really good films to show what she can do as well. Like, those are 2 really good choices for Gloria Grahame, I think.
Particularly The Glass Wall, where I think she's absolutely fantastic in that movie, and it's you know, that's a movie that a lot of people haven't seen, and it is as timely today as when the film was made, really, and she's just fantastic in it. Okay, this is a question more for Anne, who I know loves classic old radio and popular radio shows in general. Anne, have you ever listened to the Prairie Home Companion with Garrison Keillor? A regular feature on his show is a spoof on the private detective genre, similar to Sam Spade, called Guy Noir, Private Eye. Did you ever listen to this radio show? And if so, what did you think of the Guy Noir segments? Asks Lauren from Chicago. Lauren, the man from Chicago.
Yeah, well, I've listened to it a couple times, not a lot. I did like the Guy Noir. I mean, I sort of like Keillor's humor, because it's just, there's sort of a kind of a gentleness to it, but it's also really funny. Even though for me, the thing I remember most from that show is he just did this one time. He was just telling a story, not the Guy Noir thing, but just one of the stories he would tell on the show. And it's about this young woman getting married, and she's getting her hair done and crying, and it was really touching. About, he was just saying how like all the women around her would have protected her if she decided she didn't want to get married, and it's just a gorgeous little story. So I think he's a really great writer and performer. Anyway,
yeah, and he kept the radio, alive, you know,
in the United States.
Yeah. I have never heard an episode of Prairie Home Companion.
Yeah.
Not one. No. I heard, you know, a replay of a Guy Noir segment that was amusing, you know. But I mean, my detective spoofs go all the way back to the Fire Sign Theater, you know, and all that stuff. So
Nick Danger, Third Eye.
Nick Danger, Third Eye, you know. So that the spoofing of the private eye genre has been going on forever. I will say this is pretty cute. The noir heads will like this, but when I knew Colleen Gray, she was a devotee of the Prairie Home Companion, and she and her husband Fritz would listen religiously every week, and they would pour out like just this much scotch to listen to Prairie Home Companion. It was the only time in the week that they drank. Was to listen to Prairie Home Companion. I thought that was so funny because Colleen just did not drink. But for Garrison Keillor, she'd have a wee dram, you know. That was pretty cute.
Yeah, and just I wanted to say really quickly too on the parodying of detective stuff. I mean, that was a popular thing in old time radio. I mean, Jack Webb did a couple really hilarious detective spoofs that I just can't recommend enough. Plus, Dick Powell did Richard Diamond, and then actually the Sam Spade with Howard Duff were hilarious. I mean, they were really, really funny. So it was being spoofed at the time that the films were being made, too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I always felt, I know a lot of people would argue this, but I always felt that The Dark Corner, you know, the Fox film with Mark Stevens and Lucille Ball, William Bendix, Clifton Webb, I always felt that it was a bit of a spoof already.
Yeah.
You know, that they were like making fun of the private eye genre in a you know, not a mocking way, but that a lot of Mark Stevens's dialogue was clearly like amped up, you know, and it was just very amusing in that way. Like it was already, it already felt a little bit like Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid, and it was only 1946, you know?
Yeah, well, and I think that film too, it's like, it kind of reminds me of the films, like there's a whole subgenre of meta horror now. And that's what that movie kind of reminds me of, where there's a certain amount of self-awareness of the being in a detective story.
So it's kind of meta noir.
Yeah.
In a way, or meta detective, or meta whatever you call it. So, okay, here I'm going to read this one.
Okay.
This is from Keith. Much is made of the unreliable narrator angle in Detour, but what about Bogey in Dark Passage? If you accept the story at face value, there's a lot of coincidence and illogic. But if you buy into the protagonist having been guilty of murdering his wife and then killing his best friend and the blackmailer and Agnes Moorehead to protect his fake alibi, it all seems more realistic. In which case, he gets off scot-free and gets the girl to boot. Has this theory been kicked around by the noir cognoscenti? What do you think about that? That Vincent Parry is actually lying through the whole movie?
Well, Charlotte just started meowing like crazy, so she's saying he's a liar. So,
okay,
I think that's a really interesting thing, mainly because of the end and how weirdly Agnes Moorehead dies at the end. You know, it's, you know what I mean? So like if he, I don't know, maybe he's a, you know, I could kind of see that almost more from that. But I love that idea. It's really interesting because it is kind of far-fetched. But no, I don't think so. I don't think he killed this man.
Well, I can guarantee you that was not David Goodis's intention in the novel.
Yeah.
And because he makes it, I get what you're saying about the Agnes Moorehead thing, because it seems like very similar to the way Al kills Vera in Detour. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, who's going to believe that when they retell the story? Then she like ran to the drapes and swirled up in them, and the next thing I know, she was out the window, you know?
Yeah.
And no, but I know for a fact that David Goodis spelled it out in the book that Madge was so berserk with hatred that she would kill herself in order to have him be found guilty.
Yeah.
So I do think that what happens in a lot of these cases is the unreliable narrator idea is a relatively, you can find very few concrete examples of it in classic noir fiction or films. I mean, even in Detour, it's just conjecture that that's what's happening. This is a very deconstructivist modern approach to these films that is a leap. And I think a lot of times people, when writing about these movies, they've seen them so many times that they just want to look at them from a different angle.
Yeah.
So like, what if the guy's a liar?
Yeah.
You know, how do we know? And, you know, when I wrote my novel, The Distance, my guy is clearly an unreliable narrator, but he's not unreliable to the reader.
Yeah.
The reader knows when he's lying and when he's telling the truth. He's just not a guy that you should trust at face value, you know? But in the movies, I think that's a pretty sophisticated concept to expect films from the 40s and 50s to be doing. Yeah. I don't, to me, however, that doesn't make it less valid to think about it, because one thing I like to do is watch a movie like the third or fourth time I watch it. If you watch it from a perspective of characters who aren't the protagonist, a different kind of experience can emerge. And the number one example of this for me is Vertigo. Watching Vertigo from the point of view of the women instead of from Jimmy Stewart's point of view, you see an entirely different story. It is an entirely different story. And
I'll be honest with you, Eddie, the first time I saw that film, I was watching it from a women's perspective.
Yeah.
I was simply not bought into his reality in that film. That's not who I empathized with at all.
Yeah, because nobody watching a movie in 1957 or 58 thinks of Jimmy Stewart as a weird, you know, fetishist sociopath freak that he becomes in that movie, you know?
Yeah.
And when you watch it from you know, Kim Novak's point of view, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
It's terrifying because Jimmy Stewart becomes like this psycho stalker who's going to take over this woman's life. She can't get away from either of these guys, from Gavin Elster or from Scotty Ferguson, you know?
Yeah.
But you know, back then they weren't going to make a movie from her point of view.
Yeah.
So, which is one of the things that I like about, you know, noir today. Bring it on. Where there, if you're going to remake Shadow of a Doubt, or you're going to remake Vertigo or something, remake it from somebody else's point of view, right? And it could just be a really interesting movie. That's my attitude anyway.
No, it'd be interesting with Shadow of a Doubt. It'd be interesting to see it from Uncle Charlie's point of view.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing that's because we see it from young Charlie's point of view, but you know, it would be really noir to see that whole thing done from the bad guy's point of view, you know, or like In a Lonely Place, which has never been made the way Dorothy Hughes wrote it, which is, you know, that Dixon Steele is a sociopathic killer. But if you told the story, if you kept that, but told the story from Laurel's point of view, then you've got something that's so different than the source material that people can't just compare apples and apples. It's like, this is a different experience, you know, based on the same material. Okay, I'm gonna read another one here. A recent questioner said something along the lines of, it's not noir unless someone calls a woman they're not related to sister. I have a lot of sympathy for this, as the purple dialogue and mid-century idioms are easily one of my favorite aspects of noir. For example, I'm always happy to hear a character given their birth, city, state as a nickname, such as in Detour, where Charlie Haskell starts calling Tom Neal's character New York. Hey, New York, reach in the glove box there, New York. Or throughout Phantom Lady, where Ella Raines' Carol is called Kansas. Hey, Kansas. A couple of questions. Are there any other examples of these city-state nicknames in noir or films of the classic era? It feels like it should be more commonplace, but these two are the only ones I can think of. Do you know any where somebody's called by their I don't know. There should be like there's got to be like a Philly Joe Jones somewhere in there. There's got to be a Philly, or there's got to be a Frisco, or a.
Well, I feel like that isn't there a character named Brooklyn in something? I swear.
Brooklyn. Hey, Brooklyn. That really sounds familiar.
Yeah.
Brooklyn. Hey, Brooklyn. Possibly. I mean, this is what I like about the way we do this, is I know that people are going to fill up the Facebook thread with ones that we can't think of right now. But yeah, the other thing about this just popped into my head because I was thinking of Los Angeles, but I love in the old noir films when they pronounce Los Angeles, Los Angeles.
Los Angeles. Yeah.
You know, that always cracks me. Anne Savage called it Los Angeles. And it's like she's been living there for like how many decades, and she was still calling it Los Angeles.
But Houston does that in The Grifters.
Oh, Angelica Houston. Yes, she does. Yes, she does. Yeah, classic.
Yeah.
I'd forgotten about that. Yeah. And then the second part of this question is, what are your personal "it's not noir unless" examples? Like, I guess that means like it's only noir if this is in the film. And I don't really know. Amazingly, I don't know. Do you have any?
No, not really, because for me, it's sort of like, you know, I mean, I know noir when I see it, and a lot of times you can see something really noir that doesn't necessarily have what you normally associate with it. Like, I know we use this example all the time, but Leave Her to Heaven's like a primary example of that, where there is so much in there. I mean, it's beautiful Technicolor and all the stuff, but she is, I think, the most horrific femme fatale of all time. I mean, she's beyond the pale.
I don't want to think about this too much, because we have over the course of years kind of elasticized, if there is such a word, the definition, or not the definition, because there's never been a definition. We have elasticized what people's interpretation of noir is. So what this gentleman, it is a gentleman, Andy, what this gentleman is asking is like, you know, it's noir when it's always night, there are blinking neon signs, the street is dark with more than night, there's a femme fatale that comes in, there's lots of cigarette smoke, and there's lots of wisecracks. You know, the dialogue is all wisecracks. That's how people identify the rudimentary elements, iconic elements of noir. But then for every one of those, I could cite another film that breaks all those rules. You know, there is no femme fatale. It takes place in daylight, like we were just talking about, you know, Ripley. I guess bottom line for me, even though I violate this all the time because it's not a prerequisite, but it's noir when you are, to me, when you as the reader or viewer are asked to empathize with the person who is doing something wrong. Like, you know, what they're doing is wrong. Like, I'm going to rob this bank, and I'm going to kill my partner, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, you're like, okay, go do it. Let's see what happens. You know, that's, to me, that's noir. right?
Yeah.
But of course there are, you know, there's T-men and all this stuff where that doesn't really apply, but those films are just saturated in noir style.
Yeah.
But as the essential kernel of noir, for me, it's that you empathize with people doing the wrong thing.
Yeah. No,
It doesn't mean that, you know, does it? And there's something grotesquely satisfying about seeing them fail.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's kind of the point.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think also it's almost too, I can also say there are things that I've seen that have like all these noir things that you associate with noir, like maybe it's told in flashback and this and that, but they're not really noir to me because there's sort of something missing in it. And I think it is around, I think it's around morality. Like noir is a lot about morality and people doing things they shouldn't and being, you know, divided in how they're feeling about something. And so I think there's like a moral, something around morality that's really noir.
Well, it pushes those buttons. It really pushes those buttons. I'm not saying that all the noir are tales of karma, you know, where you do something wrong and you're going to, you know, get your comeuppance in the end. You know, we just showed Body Heat on Noir, not on, you know, on TCM, and you know, people absolutely loved that movie when it came out in '81, and they love it now because the villain gets away with it all.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not, but the film is constantly playing with those moral issues.
Yeah.
Like you're following Ned, you know, the William Hurt character, and it's like, would I do this?
Yeah.
If I was so crazy enthralled to this woman and I really thought I could get away with this. I mean, he is incredibly stupid in that movie.
Yeah.
But still, that's okay because, you know, that's part of what this is all about. Anyway, so that's my answer to that one.
I just read a great short story about a mother-daughter team that the stage injuries involving falling for settlement money. It is a compelling story with the mother performing her first fall with her 2-year-old daughter. This has a very disturbing mother and daughter trapped in this grim world of scams, incurring real and fake injuries. Are there other noir movies with a mother-daughter team working cons? And that's Linda from Minnesota.
Wow. I wish that she had mentioned what that story was.
No, me too.
Because honestly, this is something that hits close to home. Because my wife, Kathleen, is a manufacturer's rep and sells to retailers. And we have experienced empathized with retailers who have been hit by this.
Yeah.
By the confidence, you know, the con job. It's not really a confidence game. It's a grift, you know, where they go in and slip and fall and say you had water on the floor and I'm going to sue you and blah, blah, blah. And oh my God, I'd rather somebody rob a bank, you know, than do that because these small business owners cannot take that hit, you know, and it's just those kind of criminals don't charm me. Let's put it that way. But the mother-daughter thing, I don't know. It's hard. You just mentioned Angelica Houston and the Grifters, and that's what I immediately flashed on. But of course, Angelica Houston and Annette Bening are not mother and daughter. It's Angelica Houston and John Cusack are mother and son, who were both con men, you know, and grifters. But other than that, I can't think of it. You know, and it's not a confidence game. I know I thought of Megan Abbott's book, Queen Pin, where there's an older woman, very much like the Angelica Houston character in The Grifters, who like grooms a young girl to be her protege. That has a certain element of that in it. But in terms of movies, I can't really think of any. I don't think that was... You got anything?
Oh, there's a comedy. I think it's Susan Sarandon and Jennifer Love Hewitt who play a mother the older woman, the mother, marries a guy, and then the daughter seduces them so that she can get a big payout on the divorce. I cannot remember the name of the film.
Okay, that's very close. That's very close to what she's talking about. Wow, Susan Sarandon and Jennifer Love Hewitt, mother and daughter.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm going to stop thinking about that right now. And when was that movie made?
Oh gosh, I think it was the 90s.
Well, yeah, I mean Jennifer
yeah.
Love Hewitt had her moment, you know.
And she's very good in it. And
she is good. I always thought
chemistry.
She was good.
Yeah.
But you know, she was kind of a teen queen.
Yeah. Well, and this was she was very, you know, sexual in this. I mean, she's very sexy.
Remind me of when she was not.
Yeah, but she wasn't really like, you know, I mean, this is a more like out there role for her.
Okay, all right. Well, I know what I'm looking for as soon as we get off the phone here. So, okay, here's one. In the June 3rd edition of Ask Eddie, you mentioned the actor Dan Duryea. Oh my God, the Duryea fan club, always getting the sleazeball roles in his noir movies. I think he deserves these roles. As he does very well with them. My question to you is, do you think he would have been a good fit as the villainous Mr. Potter in the movie It's a Wonderful Life? Had Lionel Barrymore not been available, I think he would have been a good evil guy in that film. What's your take on that, Ann?
I think he would have been a great George Bailey.
Well, let me put it this way. I can see him more as George Bailey than I can see him as Mr. Potter.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's so funny because that's Dan. Dan is asking that question. I want to ask Dan how old he is, because it strikes me that when have you seen a banker in a classic film who wasn't fat?
Mm-hmm, I know.
I mean, it's like it's like to think of Dan Duryea as a banker when he looks a little underfed in all of his roles. Yeah. You know, and that was a thing in Hollywood. If you were a banker, you were prosperous and you were well fed.
Yeah.
I mean, Mr. Potter was so well fed he couldn't stand up anymore. You know, so. I mean, no offense to Lionel Barrymore, who actually was confined to a wheelchair. But, I mean, that's an interesting take. We would call that casting against type.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Dan Duryea would have been effective in some way.
Oh, yeah.
But would people have reacted to his Mr. Potter the way they react because Lionel Barrymore is playing against Jimmy Stewart, who is already tall and thin and lanky and gangly and aw shucks and all that. If you had two of those guys playing against each other, it just might not have been as instantly registering on the audience. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, because, you know, it just would have been Edward Arnold if they could have gotten ahead.
Well, that is absolutely true.
I mean, one of those three guys.
Exactly. I mean, it's so easy to see Edward Arnold in that role instead of Lionel Barrymore. And yeah, so that's how Hollywood worked. You got typecast. You know, and one of Dan Duryea's qualities, not to beat this, but he always looked hungry. Yeah. You know, he was always on the make. Yeah. It was like he was playing an angle because he was not well fed. Yeah. I mean, that was his thing. So anyway, interesting thought, Dan. But and it's so funny that he picked It's a Wonderful Life. Out of all the like noir films that he could have interchanged Duryea with the villain, he picked It's a Wonderful Life. That's really interesting. Okay.
And this is from Paul, Eddie, and Ann. Ray Milland had some good films such as The Uninvited, The Long Weekend, and Dial In for Murder. Recently, I came across another good one, The Thief, 1952. This film is unique as it has no dialogue, but it has other background sounds. What other information can you impart about this film?
I love the way you pronounce his name, Ray Milland. I like that. Because I always say Ray Milland, like, you know, I'm like a very American sound. But considering that he wasn't an American, maybe you're right. It's Ray Milland. So I can tell you that I showed this movie. It was one of the first movies I showed at a Noir City Festival in Hollywood. It's really, really interesting film. I so want to show it on Noir Alley. And it does have a score. It has no dialogue, but it does have a musical score because Herschel Burke Gilbert composed that score, and he came to that screening. I didn't know it, but he came and introduced himself, and I did a nice interview with him after the film. That was the same night that Beverly Michaels showed up, because we showed Wicked Woman and The Thief as a double bill. And we may have even shown another, because the movie's by Russell Rouse, and that was his bit of genius, was to say, we're not going to have any dialogue in the movie, because it's about a communist spy in the United States government. And it's really interesting because Ray Milland plays this communist spy, which is one of the few quote unquote anti-communist movies of the era where the big star was playing a communist spy. Because that, you know, otherwise it was like Frank Lovejoy pretending to be a communist, you know, or Robert Ryan being, you know, they're trying to sway him into being a communist in The Woman on Pier 13. But in this one, the guy actually is a commie agent. And it's fascinating. But I made the mistake of saying it was, you know, there was no sound or no something. And Herschel Burke Gilbert said, "Excuse me, there's a musical score and I wrote it." That's the way you want to get schooled, you know, by the guy who actually wrote the music. That was pretty great.
I wish you had to program that for North City one of these years, because I want to see it.
It's pretty good. You know, it's very suspenseful, because the whole idea was, if you were a communist spy, imagine the tension and the pressure you would be under, because you'd be afraid of being discovered.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's very quiet, and he like speaks to no one. He goes about his job. He's doing all these secretive things, and he gets very, very paranoid, and he can't talk to anyone. And it was very effective movie. Okay, now we have our last one. Here we go. I was wondering if you could comment on my assessment of the typical noir character from the 1950s. In post-war America, men came home from the war, found a job, a wife, a home, started a family, and ended up in retirement one day. Well, that's if things go well. Okay, but this is not the case for our noir non-professional, non-police officer, government worker, reporter. They can't hold a job. They can't follow instructions, have poor social skills, and blame everyone else for their lot in life. They feel picked on and overlooked. The problem is their obsession for money as a cure-all for their problems. It's a fantasy. Even if they were to pull off the perfect caper, they would be broke inside a year. I'm not positive about that. This noir character's biggest problem is that he can't take any personal responsibility for their actions or have a plan or structure to move ahead in life. Eddie, how accurate is my assessment of these characters, and can you add anything to what I put together? And that again is Lauren from Chicago. Lauren, you sound like a motivational speaker. Get your life together, get a plan, you know, get some friends, learn social skills. No, I think Lauren kind of hits it on the head, you know, but is missing one thing, is that what made these films remarkable and new is that audiences could relate to these characters. Because, you know, I wouldn't say, for instance, he's describing a lot of characters in film noir. He's describing Joe Parkson, in Act of Violence, the Robert Ryan character. But he's not describing Frank Enley in Act of Violence, who totally fits in and is a pillar of the community and marries a beautiful wife. He's on the road to retirement. And as it turns out, Frank Enley is the more noir character of the two of them. When you look at somebody like John Garfield in Force of Evil, I was thinking of, where he's a very sharp, bright lawyer who is on a fast track, and the guy is not a loser. He is just morally compromised, and as Lauren says, it's because of money, because he wants the money, right? And so that's Abe Polanski's very scathing critique of capitalism and how the desire for money skews everything. But then you look at a picture like The Breaking Point, again with Garfield, and he is that character that Lauren is describing, but he is married and he has two beautiful little girls, and he lives in a good place, but still it's like you can't get over it, because another big theme, it's not always in noir that the people are responsible for their own self-destruction. Sometimes life just kicks you in the ass, and you don't have a way of fighting back. You make one mistake and then it gets compounded over and over again, and that's why these are very cautionary tales. I think go ahead, Ann. I'm sorry.
Two films popped into my mind. One was Pitfall, where you have someone that has like everything. He has a good life. He's but he gets very distracted and caught up with this woman. I'm gonna
interrupt just for a second, because your thought applies back to Judy's question earlier about boredom and ennui.
Yeah,
that's exactly what the plot is in Pitfall. Yes, he's just bored. He's got everything, but it bores him, so he wants to take the risk.
Right, exactly. And I also really love that film because in the publicity materials and stuff, they really make it look like Elizabeth Scott's going to be this femme fatale. And I like the movie. She is not a femme fatale. She gets screwed over by one man and endangered by one man after another. The guy that she was married to, and then this guy who's obsessive and stalking her, and then the main character also. And the way that she's sort of, to me, she winds up really being the protagonist of the film. Because man, you just see her just really get kicked around in a very honest, truthful way. Like it wasn't.
See, there's another a great call up there, and to cite that film, because that's the perfect example of what I was talking about. When you watch the movie a second time from another character's point of view, Mona Stevens, the Liz Scott character in that movie, if you think Dick Powell is living the noir life, she is the one. She's got a psycho boyfriend in jail, a psycho stalker following her, and this bored husband who's, decides he's going to have a little dalliance with her, and all these men screw up her life, and she ends up worse. Well, she doesn't end up worse than Raymond Burr in that movie, but she pays the price. Yeah. I mean, that's a story that could totally be redone from the woman's point of view, because when you think about it, I mean, that John Forbes character that Dick Powell plays is just a rube. He's just kind of an idiot in the film, I mean, and I'm sure all men can empathize with this character of like, if this babe thinks I'm hot stuff, the thought crosses the mind. But I mean, it's Liz Scott's character that is truly the noir protagonist in that film. That's also the way I feel about No Way Out, with Sidney Poitier and Richard Widmark, which is this socially conscious race, movie about racism. But Linda Darnell plays the character who's like stuck in the middle in that film, because Sidney Poitier is just noble as noble gets, and Widmark is this vile racist psychopath, but she's the one who's stuck with him. And she starts her, her eyes open, and she's like, this black guy is great, but she has no way out. She's the character that has no way out. Anyway, was there another film that you were thinking of there? Because you mentioned Pitfall.
I was also kind of thinking about Chicago Calling too, where you see someone who's really failing in life, and he's very much, because what's
Dan Duryea again.
Yeah. But what struck me is a lot of the things that he was talking about, and Lauren was talking about his question, remind me of active alcoholics. And the kind of the process of going through a 12-step program is basically learning to take responsibility. That really is the key thing. And that's what I like about Chicago Calling, is that Duryea's character, who I think is an alcoholic, frankly.
It seems, I kind of read it as such.
I read him as an alcoholic. And you see him through this kind of really terrible trial that he goes through of becoming a much better person at the end of it. But it's about him taking responsibility for life, not being passive about everything. And that's why his because he and his wife on the verge of splitting, because she just can't take it.
Yes. And that's I don't know that movie could be effectively remade, because so much of the suspense involves, the cutting off of the phone.
Yeah.
And I don't know that anybody would believe that today, but that was a beautiful analogy for like the indifference of the world. It's like he for people who haven't seen Chicago Calling, it's about a guy who's down on his luck and his family's going to leave him, and they decide to go to Chicago to get away from him for a while. He lives in downtown LA, and then they're in a serious car accident, but the phone company cuts off his phone because he can't pay his phone bill, so he has no way of knowing the status of his wife and daughter, who are in the hospital in Chicago. And so the whole movie is about this guy trying to pay a phone bill. Yeah,
it's seriously, that is the entire plot. That's
the entire plot of the movie, so that he can hear from his family. And it's a great movie. It really is. And anyway, but that was an interesting observation, Lauren, because perhaps the exceptions that we cite may prove the validity of of what you're talking about there. That's certainly true of any noir film in which the central character is super desperate and pulls something, like a heist, or, it's the classic, although this isn't McMurray's motivation in Double Indemnity. I did it for the money, and I did it for a woman, and I didn't get the money, and I didn't get the woman. Pretty, isn't it? But he's doing it because it's a game. He's he's like a terrorist. He wants to prove that his mentor is full of BS. He isn't really that crazy about Phyllis
or the money.
He just wants to get away with it.
He wants to be the smartest guy in the room. He wants to prove that he can pull, and that's also what makes the ending though so much more tragic at the end, when he has that final scene with his mentor, with Edward G. Robinson. That's still one of the most beautiful scenes I've ever seen in a film noir. It's because he's brokenhearted.
Well, my two favorite endings in film noir, I think I have three favorite endings in film noir, and this is the perfect way to end this segment. I love the ending of Crisscross, because it's just so freaking Jacobean. It's like everybody's on stage and they all get blown away, and it's like the end. I love the end as much as tragic and crushing as it is. I love the ending of The Breaking Point, and just that like a minor key can take all of the air out of you. It's so devastating, the end of that movie. Yeah. And then of course Double Indemnity, because the genius of realizing that, killing Walter in the gas chamber is nowhere near as powerful and effective as having him bleeding on the floor with Barton Keyes. And that dialogue, whether Chandler wrote it or Wilder wrote it, whoever wrote that, you know, when he says, closer than that, Walter, you know, you never realize how close it was. You know, you're right. It was closer than that, Walter. It was like that line, and then lighting the cigarette. I mean, that is the perfect ending for that film. Unbelievable. So much better than the book, where they jump off a ship and feed themselves to a marauding
But
shark.
I would have loved to see Barbara Stanwyck in the kabuki makeup and
with the wind blowing, and she's on the prow of the ship, and it's like, I'm feeding myself to the shark, you know. It's like,
She could have pulled that off.
Oh,
That's
of course.
all I'm
I
saying.
can't imagine Fred McMurray doing it, but I can see.
She could have.
Well, that makes me laugh, Anne, because I always think of, have you seen Flesh and Fantasy?
Yeah.
You know, so in her segment in Flesh and Fantasy, she's on the steamship with Charles Boyer. And whenever I watch that, I always think of the actual ending of Double Indemnity. And whenever she's like standing, looking out at the horizon with that 1,000-yard stare, I think, do it, just jump off and then it'll be just like Double Indemnity. Okay, that's enough. I think we have brought it in for a landing here this week. So
yeah, I think so too.
That was fun. I'm looking at my screen and it's like I'm in Dante's Inferno or something.
And you get this red tint. Yeah.
Everything is very red. Well, it's very warm here, which is why I was nursing this gin and tonic for 1 hour and 42 minutes.
It's very white on my side, so it's like hell in heaven.
There you go. Yes, you're very ethereal, and I don't know is Charlotte allowed in heaven?
God, I don't think so.
Look at her. She's giving me the death stare. She's looking right at me on the screen. She's like, stop talking to that guy. That's enough. Feed me. Stop talking to him and feed me. Hey, Charlotte. Meow, meow. I got a rise out of her. Okay. All right, Anne, that was fantastic. Had great fun.
Me too.
And again, thanks to Peter for that donation drive.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. Elizabeth Rachel Heavey Brierly. I'm very sorry about her. And I hope people will generously donate to the foundation in her memory.
Yeah, and you can do that at filmnoirfoundation.org.
Okay, very good. And we'll see you back here next time. Okay.
Yes. Okay.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.